Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is Book 6 Part 3. The song in the streets has done its work, and King Saul's love for David has soured into something murderous. We watch the spear leave his hand across the hall, not once but twice watch him offer David his daughters as bait for traps, and watch the people who love David save him, his wife Michal lowering him from a window, his friend Jonathan, the king's own son, choosing David over his father's crown. So begins the long flight. David the anointed in secret becomes David the fugitive, running from town to wilderness to the priests of Nob, who feed him and pay for it with a massacre, to the court of the Philistine king of Gath, where he feigns madness to save his life, to caves and strongholds, gathering the desperate and the discontented into a little army. Let us go on.
The women became the occasion of Saul's envy and hatred toward David. They came out to meet the victorious army with cymbals, drums, and every show of joy, and they sang in response to one another. The wives said that Saul had slain his many thousands of the Philistines, and the virgins answered that David had slain his 10,000s. When the king heard them singing in this way, he noticed that he himself had the smaller share in their praise, while the greater number, the 10,000s, was attributed to the young man. He considered within himself that, after such mighty applause, nothing was lacking to David except the kingdom. So he began to be afraid of David and suspicious of him. Accordingly, Saul removed David from the position he had held before. David had been his armor-bearer, which out of fear now seemed to Saul much too close a position for him. So he made him captain over 1,000. This was indeed a better post in itself, but Saul thought it safer for himself, because he intended to send David against the enemy and into battles, hoping that he would be killed in such dangerous conflicts. But David had God going with him wherever he went, and therefore he prospered greatly in his undertakings. His powerful success was plain to see, so much so that Saul's daughter, who was still a virgin, fell in love with him. Her affection became so strong that it could not be hidden, and her father learned of it. Saul was glad to hear this, because he intended to use it as a snare against David. He hoped it would become the cause of David's destruction and danger. I pledge myself to give my daughter to him in marriage if he brings me 600 heads of my enemies. Saul supposed that when so large a reward was proposed to David, and when David aimed to gain great glory by undertaking something so dangerous and incredible, he would immediately set about it and perish at the hands of the Philistines. Saul thought his designs against David would then succeed exactly as he wished, because he would be freed from him, and would get him killed, not by his own hand, but by another man. So he ordered his servants to test how David would receive this proposal of marrying the young woman. Accordingly, they began to tell David that King Saul loved him, as did all the people, and that Saul wanted to become connected with him by giving him this young woman in marriage. Does it seem to you a small thing to become the king's son-in-law? It does not seem so to me, especially since I belong to a low family, without glory or honor. When Saul was told by his servants what answer David had given, he told them to say that he did not want any money or dowry from David, since that would be more like selling his daughter than giving her in marriage. He wanted only a son-in-law who had courage and every other kind of virtue, qualities he saw David possessed. Saul said that, because David was to marry his daughter, he did not desire gold or silver from him, nor any wealth brought from his father's house, but only revenge on the Philistines, namely 600 of their heads. No more desirable or glorious present could be brought to him than this. Saul said he would much rather have this than any customary dowry for his daughter, that she should be married to a man of such character, and to one who had the testimony of having conquered his enemies. When these words of Saul were brought to David, he was pleased with them and believed that Saul truly desired this family connection with him. Without waiting to deliberate any longer, or turning over in his mind whether the proposal was possible or difficult, he and his companions immediately attacked the enemy and set out to fulfill the condition of the marriage. Because God made all things easy and possible for David, he killed many of the Philistines, cut off the heads of 600 of them, and came to the king. By showing Saul these heads of the Philistines, he demanded that he be allowed to have Saul's daughter in marriage. Saul had no way to escape his promise. He thought it would be shameful either to appear a liar after promising David this marriage, or to appear to have acted treacherously toward him by putting him to what was almost impossible in order to have him killed. So Saul gave him his daughter in marriage. Her name was Michal. Saul was not disposed to remain long in the state he was in. When he saw that David was held in great esteem both by God and by the multitude, he became afraid. He could not hide his fear concerning such great matters as his kingdom and his life, for to be deprived of either would be a very great calamity. So he resolved to have David killed, and he commanded his son Jonathan and his most faithful servants to kill him. But Jonathan was astonished at his father's change toward David, that it had gone so far from showing him no small goodwill to plotting how to have him killed. Because Jonathan loved the young man and honored him for his virtue, he told David about the secret command his father had given, and about his intentions toward him. Jonathan advised David to be careful and to stay away the next day. He said he would greet his father, and if he found a favorable opportunity, he would speak with him about David, learn the cause of his anger, and show how little ground there was for it. He would argue that Saul ought not to kill a man who had done so many good things for the multitude, and had been a benefactor to Saul himself. Because of these benefits, David ought reasonably to receive pardon even if he had been guilty of the greatest crimes. Jonathan said that afterward he would tell David his father's decision. David accepted this useful advice and kept himself out of the king's sight. What unjust action, O father, either small or great, have you found so blameworthy in David that you have ordered us to kill a man who has been of great advantage to your own preservation, and of still greater advantage in punishing the Philistines? He delivered the people of the Hebrews from the reproach and mockery they endured for 40 days together, when he alone had courage enough to accept the enemy's challenge. After that he brought back as many heads of our enemies as he had been appointed to bring, and received my sister in marriage as his reward. His death would therefore be very sorrowful to us, not only because of his virtue, but because of our close relation to him. Your daughter would be injured at the same time that he was killed, and would be forced to experience widowhood before she could enjoy any benefit from their life together. Consider these things, change your mind to a more merciful temper, and do no harm to a man who, first of all, has done us the greatest kindness by preserving you. When an evil spirit and demons had seized you, he drove them out and brought rest to your soul from their attacks. In the second place, he has avenged us on our enemies. It is a shameful thing to forget such benefits. On the next day Jonathan came to Saul as soon as he saw him in a cheerful and joyful mood, and began the speech about David. Saul was pacified by Jonathan's words and swore to his son that he would do David no harm, for a righteous speech proved stronger than the king's anger and fear. So Jonathan sent for David and brought him the good news from his father that he would be preserved. He also brought David to his father, and David continued with the king as before. About this time, when the Philistines made a new expedition against the Hebrews, Saul sent David with an army to fight them. David joined battle with them, killed many of them, and returned to the king after his victory. But Saul did not receive him as David expected after such success. Saul was grieved by his prosperity, because he thought David would be more dangerous to him after acting so gloriously. When the demoniacal spirit came upon Saul, threw him into disorder, and disturbed him, he called David into the bedchamber where he lay. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he ordered David to soothe him by playing the harp and singing hymns. When David did this at his command, Saul threw the spear at him with great force. But David saw it coming, avoided it, fled to his own house, and stayed there all that day. Let the sun not find you here when it rises, for if it does, that will be the last time it sees you. Flee while the night gives you the opportunity, and may God lengthen it for your sake. Know this, if my father finds you, you are a dead man. At night the king sent officers and commanded them to watch David until morning, so that he would not escape completely, and so that he might come into the judgment hall, be delivered up, condemned, and killed. When Michal, David's wife and the king's daughter, understood what her father intended, she came to her husband. She had little hope for his deliverance, and was also greatly concerned about her own life, for she could not bear to live if she were deprived of him. After warning him, she let him down by a cord through the window and saved him. Then she arranged a bed for him as though he were sick, and put a goat's liver under the bedclothes. When her father sent at daybreak to seize David, she told those who came that he had been unwell that night. She showed them the covered bed, and by the movement of the liver, which made the bedclothes move also, caused them to believe that David was breathing like someone with asthma. When those who had been sent told Saul that David had been unwell during the night, he ordered him brought in that condition, because he intended to kill him. But when they came, uncovered the bed, and discovered the woman's contrivance, they reported it to the king. Her father complained that she had saved his enemy and tricked him. She then invented a plausible defense for herself, saying that David had threatened to kill her, and that she helped him preserve himself out of fear. She said she ought to be forgiven for this help, because it had not been done by her own free choice, but out of necessity. She added that she did not suppose Saul was so eager to kill his enemy as he was that she should be saved. Accordingly Saul forgave the young woman. But David, after escaping this danger, came to the prophet Samuel at Ramah, and told him what snares the king had laid for him, and how he had come very near to death when Saul threw a spear at him, though he had been in no way guilty toward him. He had not been cowardly in his battles against Saul's enemies, but had succeeded well in all of them by God's assistance, and this very thing was the cause of Saul's hatred toward David. When the prophet learned of the king's unjust actions, he left the city Ramah and took David with him to a certain place called Naioth, where he stayed with him. But when Saul was told that David was with the prophet, he sent soldiers to him and ordered them to seize David and bring him back. When they came to Samuel and found a congregation of prophets there, they became partakers of the divine spirit and began to prophesy. When Saul heard this, he sent others to David, and they prophesied in the same way as the first. He then sent others again, and this third group also prophesied. At last Saul became angry, and went there himself in great haste. When he was near the place, Samuel, before seeing him, made him prophesy also. When Saul came to him, he was disordered in mind and under the violent agitation of a spirit. He took off his garments, fell down, and lay on the ground all that day and night in the presence of Samuel and David. David went from there and came to Jonathan the son of Saul. He lamented to him about the snares that Jonathan's father had laid for him, and said that although he had done no evil and had not offended Saul, Saul was still very eager to have him killed. Jonathan urged him not to believe his own suspicions, nor the slanders of those who had spread such reports, if any had done so. He told David to depend on him and take courage, because his father had no such intention. If it had been so, Saul would have told Jonathan about the matter and taken his advice, as he usually consulted him in common when acting in other affairs. But David swore to him that it was true. He asked Jonathan to believe him and provide for his safety rather than despise what he was telling him with great sincerity. He said Jonathan would believe it either when he saw David killed himself or learned it by inquiry from others. David also said that the reason Saul had not told Jonathan these things was that Saul knew the friendship and affection Jonathan had for him. "I know that you are willing to gratify me in everything and obtain for me what I desire. Tomorrow is the new moon, and I have been accustomed to sit down then with the king at supper. If it seems good to you, I will go out of the city and hide myself privately there. If Saul asks why I am absent, tell him that I have gone to my own city Bethlehem to keep a festival with my own tribe, and add that you gave me permission to do so. If he says, as is usually said about friends who have gone abroad, it is well that he went, then be assured that no hidden mischief or enmity need be feared from him. But if he answers otherwise, that will be a sure sign that he has some designs against me. Then inform me of your father's inclinations, out of pity for my situation, and out of your friendship for me. As signs of that friendship, you have been willing to accept my assurances of love for you and to give the same assurances to me, those of a master to his servant. But if you discover any wickedness in me, prevent your father and kill me yourself." Jonathan heard these last words with indignation. He promised to do what David asked, and to inform him if his father's answers implied anything gloomy or any enmity against him. So that David might depend on him more firmly, Jonathan took him out into the open field, into the pure air, and swore that he would neglect nothing that could preserve David. "I appeal to that God who, as you see, is spread everywhere, and who knows this intention of mine before I explain it in words, as the witness of this covenant with you. I will not stop making frequent trials of my father's purpose until I learn whether there is any hidden disorder in the most secret parts of his soul. When I have learned it, I will not conceal it from you, but will reveal it to you, whether he is gently or harshly disposed. God himself knows this. I pray that he may always be with you, for he is with you now and will not forsake you. He will make you superior to your enemies, whether my father is one of them, or whether I myself should be such. Only remember what we now do. If it happens that I die, keep my children alive, and repay to them the kindness you have now received." After Jonathan had sworn in this way, he dismissed David and told him to go to a certain place on that plain where Jonathan usually performed his exercises. He said that as soon as he knew his father's mind, he would come there to him with only one servant. If Jonathan shot 3 darts at the mark, and then told his servant to carry the 3 darts away because they were in front of him, David should know that there was no harm to fear from Saul. But if David heard him say the contrary, he should expect the contrary from the king. Still, Jonathan said David would gain safety through him, and would by no means suffer harm. He again told David not to forget, in the time of his prosperity, what Jonathan had asked of him, and to be helpful to Jonathan's children. After David received these assurances from Jonathan, he went to the appointed place. On the next day, which was the new moon, the king purified himself according to custom and came to supper. His son Jonathan sat by him on his right hand, and Abner, the captain of his army, sat on the other hand. Saul saw that David's seat was empty, but said nothing. He supposed that David had not purified himself because he had been with his wife, and therefore could not be present. But when he saw that David was not there on the 2nd day of the month either, he asked his son Jonathan why the son of Jesse had not come to the supper and the feast, neither the day before nor that day. Jonathan said that David had gone, according to their agreement, to his own city where his tribe was keeping a festival, and that he had gone by Jonathan's permission. Jonathan added that David had also invited him to come to their sacrifice, and said that if Saul would allow him, he would go there, since Saul knew the goodwill Jonathan bore him. Then Jonathan understood his father's hatred toward David, and plainly saw his whole disposition. Saul could not restrain his anger. He reproached Jonathan, called him the son of a runaway and an enemy, and said that Jonathan was David's partner and helper. Saul said Jonathan's behavior showed that he had no regard for himself or for his mother, and that he would not be persuaded of this, that as long as David was alive, their kingdom was not secure. Yet Saul ordered Jonathan to send for David so that he might be punished. Jonathan answered by asking what David had done that Saul should punish him. Saul was no longer satisfied to express his anger in words alone, but snatched up his spear, leaped toward Jonathan, and wanted to kill him. He did not do what he intended, because his friends prevented him, but it was plain to his son that Saul hated David, and greatly desired to dispatch him, so much so that he had almost killed his own son with his own hands on David's account. The king's son then rose hastily from supper. Because of his grief, he could not put anything into his mouth, and he wept all night, both because he himself had nearly been destroyed, and because David's death had been determined. As soon as day came, Jonathan went out into the plain before the city, as though to perform his exercises, but in reality to inform his friend what disposition his father had toward him, as he had agreed to do. When Jonathan had done what had been agreed, he dismissed the servant who followed him and sent him back to the city. Jonathan himself went into the desert, came into David's presence, and spoke with him. David appeared, fell at Jonathan's feet, bowed down to him, and called him the preserver of his soul. Jonathan lifted him from the ground, and they embraced one another. They gave a long farewell, and not without tears. They lamented their age, the close friendship of which envy would deprive them, and the separation that must now be expected, which seemed to them no better than death itself. At last they recovered themselves from their lamentation, urged one another to remember the oaths they had sworn to each other, and parted. David fled from the king and from the death he was in danger of suffering at his hands, and came to the city Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. When Ahimelech saw him coming alone, with neither friend nor servant with him, he was surprised and asked why no one was with him. David answered that the king had commanded him to do a certain secret matter, and that, since it was secret, there was no need for anyone to accompany him if Ahimelech wished to know so much. However, David said that he had ordered his servants to meet him at a certain place. Then he asked Ahimelech to give him something to eat, saying that if he supplied him, he would be acting like a friend and helping him in the business he was now about. When he had obtained what he wanted, David also asked whether Ahimelech had any weapons with him, either sword or spear. Now at Nob there was a servant of Saul, a Syrian by birth, whose name was Dog, who kept the king's mules. The high priest said that he had no such weapons, but added that the sword of Goliath was there, which David had dedicated to God after he killed the Philistine. When David received the sword, he fled out of the country of the Hebrews into the land of the Philistines, over which Achish ruled. When the king's servants recognized him, and made him known to the king himself, telling him that this was David, who had killed many tens of thousands of the Philistines, David became afraid that the king would put him to death, and that he would meet from Achish the danger he had escaped from Saul. So he pretended to be distracted and mad, letting his spittle run out of his mouth and doing other similar things before the king of Gath, so that Achish might believe these actions came from such a disorder. Accordingly the king became very angry with his servants for bringing him a madman, and he ordered them to throw David out of the city at once. After David escaped from Gath in this way, he came to the tribe of Judah and stayed in a cave near the city of Adullam. Then he sent word to his brothers, and told them where he was. They came to him with all their kindred, and as many others as were in need or afraid of King Saul also came and formed a body around him. They told him they were ready to obey his orders, and altogether they were about 400. David took courage now that such a force and assistance had come to him. He left that place and came to the king of the Moabites, asking him to receive his parents into his country while the outcome of David's affairs remained so uncertain. The king granted him this favor, and showed great respect to David's parents the whole time they were with him. As for David himself, when the prophet commanded him to leave the desert, go into the portion of the tribe of Judah, and stay there, he obeyed. He came to the city Hareth, which was in that tribe, and remained there. You men of my own tribe, I suppose you remember the benefits I have bestowed on you. I have made some of you owners of land, made you commanders, given you posts of honor, and set some of you over the common people and others over the soldiers. I ask you then, whether you expect greater and larger gifts from the son of Jesse. I know that you are all inclined toward him. Even my own son Jonathan is of that opinion and persuades you to be the same. I am not ignorant of the oaths and covenants between him and David, nor that Jonathan is a counselor and helper to those who conspire against me. None of you are concerned about these things, but you keep silent and watch to see how they will turn out. When Saul heard that David had been seen with a multitude around him, he fell into great disturbance and trouble. Because he knew David was bold and courageous, he suspected that something extraordinary would appear from him, openly too, which would make Saul weep and put him in distress. So he called together his friends, his commanders, and the tribe from which he himself came, to the hill where his palace stood. Sitting at a place called Arura, with his dignified courtiers and bodyguards around him, he spoke to them. When the king had finished this speech, no one else present made any answer. But Dog the Syrian, who tended Saul's mules, said that he had seen David when he came to the city Nob to Ahimelech the high priest. He said David had learned future events through Ahimelech's prophesying, had received food from him, had received the sword of Goliath, and had been safely guided by him to those to whom he wished to go. I did not know that he was your adversary, but thought him your servant, very faithful to you, a captain over 1,000 of your soldiers, and more than these, your son-in-law and kinsman. Men do not choose to confer such favors on their adversaries, but on those believed to bear them the highest goodwill and respect. Nor is this the first time I have prophesied for him. I have done it often, other times as well as now. When he told me that he had been sent by you in great haste to do something, if I had given him nothing he desired, I would have thought that I was acting against you rather than against him. Therefore do not hold any bad opinion of me, and do not suspect what I then thought an act of humanity because of what is now being told you about David's attempts against you. I acted toward him then as toward your friend and son-in-law and captain of 1,000, not as toward your adversary. Saul therefore sent for the high priest and all his kindred. He asked Ahimelech what terrible or ungrateful thing he had suffered from Saul, that he had received the son of Jesse and given him both food and weapons while David was plotting to get the kingdom. Saul also asked why he had delivered oracles to David about future things, since he could not have been unaware that David had fled from him and hated his family. The high priest did not try to deny what he had done, but boldly confessed that he had supplied David with these things, not to gratify David, but Saul himself. Yet Ahimelech's speech did not persuade Saul, because Saul's fear was so powerful that he could not give credit to an apology that was very just. So he commanded the armed men standing around him to kill Ahimelech and all his kindred. But they did not dare touch the high priest, being more afraid of disobeying God than of disobeying the king. Saul then ordered Doeg the Syrian to kill them. Doeg took his helpers, wicked men like himself, and slew Ahimelech and all his family, 385 in all. Saul also sent to Nob, the city of the priests, and killed everyone there, sparing neither women nor children, nor any other age, and he burned it. Only one son of Ahimelech, named Abiathar, escaped. These things happened just as God had foretold to Eli the high priest, when he said that his descendants would be destroyed because of the transgression of his 2 sons. By committing so barbarous a crime, murdering the whole family of the high priestly dignity, showing no pity for infants and no reverence for the aged, and overthrowing the city that God had chosen as the property and support of the priests and prophets who lived there, and had ordained as the only city allotted for the education of such men, King Saul teaches everyone to understand and consider the disposition of men. While men are private persons, and in a low condition, because they do not have the power to indulge nature or venture on what they desire, they are equitable and moderate. They pursue nothing but what is just and bend their whole minds and labors that way. Then they believe that God is present in all the actions of their lives, and that he not only sees the actions that are done, but also clearly knows the thoughts from which those actions arise. But once they are advanced to power and authority, they put off all such notions. As if they were actors on a stage, they lay aside their disguised parts and manners and take up boldness, insolence, and contempt for both human and divine laws. They do this at the very time when they especially need piety and righteousness, because they are then most exposed to envy, and everything they think and say is in the sight of all men. Then they become so insolent in their actions, as though God no longer saw them, or were afraid of them because of their power. Whatever they fear from rumors they hear, or hate by inclination, or love without reason, seems to them authentic, firm, true, and pleasing both to men and to God, but they have not the least regard for what will come afterward. They raise to honor those who have taken great pains for them, and after giving that honor they envy them. When they have brought them into high dignity, they not only deprive them of what they had obtained, but on that very account deprive them of their lives too, on wicked accusations so extravagant as to be incredible. They also punish men for actions that do not deserve condemnation, acting from slanders and accusations without examination. And this reaches not only those who deserve punishment, but as many as they are able to kill. This reflection is openly confirmed for us by the example of Saul, the son of Kish, the first king who reigned after our aristocracy and government under the judges ended. It is shown by his slaughter of 300 priests and prophets because of his suspicion about Ahimelech, and by the further wickedness of overthrowing their city. It was as if he were trying, in some way, to leave the temple, that is, the tabernacle, without either priests or prophets. He showed this effort by killing so many of them, and by not allowing even their city to remain, so that others might succeed them. But Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, who alone was saved from the family of priests killed by Saul, fled to David and told him of the calamity that had befallen their family and of the slaughter of his father. David said that when he saw Doeg there, he had not been unaware of what would follow concerning them, for even then he suspected that Doeg would falsely accuse the high priest to the king. He blamed himself as the cause of this misfortune. But he asked Abiathar to stay there and remain with him, as in a place where he might be better hidden than anywhere else.
And there we will pause, with David, an outlaw at the head of a ragged band, hunted through the wilderness by a king who has abandoned everything else to destroy him. The strange thing is that the hunted man keeps the moral high ground, while the crowned man loses it piece by piece. Next time, in part 4, the close of Book 6, the 2 times David holds Saul's life in his hand and lets him go, the king's last desperate night with the witch of Endor, and the end of it all on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.